What's up, YouTube family? This your boy Wavy Wayne back again, all right? I first just want to take a little second out to shout y'all out, man. Y'all so dope. And I'm glad that y'all been checking out the channel, man. Y'all getting better. I've been listening to y'all mixes. The mixes are sounding better. Y'all been rocking with them templates, man. And you know you staying fly in that studio gear. Check out that F12 shirt, right? That's the Wayne.wav exclusive, baby. But I really love y'all, man. Shout out to the whole YouTube family, all right? Today, we're gonna go ahead and go over a topic that a lot of my students ask me about, and that's grid modes, right? We got two different grid modes in Pro Tools. We got the absolute grid and relative grid. And when you're looking at your Pro Tools session, the grid modes are up here at the top, right? Well, all of the edit modes are up here at the top left, right? We got grid, spot, shuffle, and slip. We specifically today, we're gonna focus on that grid mode. When the grid mode is lit blue, that's how you know you are in absolute grid mode. If you click it again or click and hold, you can reveal relative grid mode, all right? Now, there's definitely reasons for the two of them. Absolute grid, though, is definitely the most used one. I honestly use absolute grid mode 90% or if not even more for all of my work, especially when I'm doing, you know, anything musical. Grid mode, absolute grid mode is the way to go, especially if you got the tempo locked in, which if you check out my how to find the tempo using an identified beat video, it's really easy. Well, it's not easy. It definitely takes some practice, takes a little bit of understanding, but when you get that method, you out of here. And if you can do that, you can do everything in Pro Tools, believe that. But grid mode, absolute grid mode, this is the way it works, all right? I'm gonna break them down to you. Absolute grid versus relative grid. So when we are in absolute grid, that basically means anytime you move the clip, right? Anytime you move the clip, the start of the clip, it's going to snap to one of your grid values. I'm gonna actually go up here and change my grid value here to 1 bar. So now we can see that, bam, if I zoom out, each one of these blue lines in my session represents my grid, right? And you can see also by being in grid mode that when I make selections, I'm only able to make selections to that grid, to the grid value. Also, if I trim a clip, for example, I can only trim to that grid value. Now, those are things that are similar between absolute grid and relative grid. See, in relative grid, if I make a selection, it still selects towards my grid value. If my grid value 1 bar, that selection 1 bar. If I trim a clip, it's going to trim based on my grid value, even if I add a fade or anything else like that, right? All of these things are the same if you are in absolute grid or relative grid, to where your grid value dictates what type of edits you will be making, okay? Now, where they differ is when you are specifically moving a clip, okay? Now, if you move a clip in absolute grid mode while it's lit blue, the start of the clip will always snap to the grid line. It'll always snap to the exact grid interval. Again, the start of the clip will always snap to that grid interval. So if I move this clip, you can see here, and let me zoom in before, I can't move it in between there anyway. It always snaps to the actual grid interval, no matter what. Right? If you want to make smaller movements, then you go up and change your grid value using the grid value selector at the top of your edit window. If I want to make quarter note movements with this clip, I change it to a quarter note. And now again, see, the lines are fainter. I don't even know what fainter, I don't even like how that sounds. The lines are more faint. They harder to see. Okay. The lines are harder to see, but if I move the clip, you see it still snaps to the individual fainter grid lines. All right, so that is absolute grid mode, right? Now I'm gonna actually change my grid mode back over to 1 bar. And what we'll see now is that the start of the clip actually falls between these two grid lines, okay? The start of the clip falls right in the middle. Now this is where relative grid comes into play. Relative grid, which I also like to call the Migos grid, and I'm gonna explain that why, right? Remember that, relative grid, AKA Migos grid. Now, relative grid comes into play. Again, you just click and hold, or you can just click it again to switch between the two. Or you can use any shortcut, you know, any shortcut that you use to recall the grid. Like, what's that number, F4 or something like that. One of those little things, boom, right? So, in relative grid, when you have relative grid selected, it allows you to move your clip by the grid interval while still maintaining the offset. So again, relative grid allows you to move your clip by the grid interval, so whatever value you set, but you will maintain that clip's offset to the grid. Now this is why I call it Migos grid, right? Because ain't they cousins or something like that? I think they cousins, and one of them name is Offset. So they relatives, and one of them named Offset. So the Migos grid allows you to move a clip, you know, allows you to move a clip by the grid increment, but still maintain this offset. So if you see what I just did there, as I move this clip, it's still moving in 1 bar increments, but it's laying in the same space between the grid. It has the same relative offset to that grid while still moving by the grid increment, okay? So again, let's recap this. If I was in absolute grid, as soon as I move this clip, what's gonna happen? I'll wait. Exactly. The start of the clip will snap to the grid line. When you're in the absolute grid, when you move a clip, the start of the clip snaps to the grid line, okay? Now, I'm gonna move this off of the grid by suspending that grid without changing. I could get into slip mode, but if you hold the command key down on the Mac or control key on the PC, it will basically allow you to temporarily suspend your grid mode or temporarily act in slip mode, right? So now you see I got free movement as long as I'm holding that command key down. I can move this clip away from my grid. That's extra right there. Go to wavywayne.com, get you a template, donate something for that jewel right there, right? Yes. I bet. So now that I got my clip offset to the grid, right, to where it has an offset to the grid, I'm going to go over to my relative grid and I'm going to move this clip by the grid increment while still maintaining its offset. So when would I even want to use relative grid versus absolute grid? Well, most of the time I'm using relative grid because I want to snap exactly to that bar position. So in most cases, so if I make a selection of something, boom, and I copy it maybe and paste it, right? I want to snap exactly to that bar position, right? Or even if I got to move a clip, right? Even if my clip's offset falls between the grid and I got to move it, oftentimes what I'll do is just trim that clip to the grid to where it snaps to the grid. See, trimming also is relative as well. I should have mentioned that. But let me just get an absolute grid. I would just trim that clip to where it actually snaps to the grid, move it to where it needs to move, and then just trim it back out, whatever was cut off during my move. So honestly, I use relative grid never, and absolute grid all the time. But what is your use for relative grid? If you use relative grid on a regular basis, let me know. Leave a comment below. If you've never used relative grid, let me know. If you didn't even know that there was another mode to relative to the grid mode, let me know that too. All right, leave a comment. Let me know what y'all think about that. That's the Wavy Way tip of the day. Thanks for rocking with your boy. Make sure you hit up wavywayne.com and use code the Wavy Way and get yourself 10% off at checkout, all right? Wavy!